Good evening and welcome. My name is Richard Ghazal, Executive Director of In Defense of Christians. We're so glad to have you join us tonight for the celebration of IDC's 10th anniversary. And for those joining us online, welcome. IDC is an organization which aims to ensure the protection and preservation of Christian communities and the ancient Christian heritage of the Middle East, the birthplace of Christianity. IDC envisions a Middle East in which the dignity and security of all people and communities are protected and respected regardless of religious, creed, or ethnicity. A Middle East in which the ancient and diverse Christian communities are allowed to coexist and thrive peacefully in their native home. In Defense of Christians seeks to achieve this goal through a three-pronged approach to advocacy, which includes public policy, public affairs, and education and training. IDC's founding a decade ago was one of necessity. In the summer of 2014, ISIS began its campaign to rid Iraq and Syria of its Christian communities and other religious minorities. This was the first step to reestablish the Islamic Caliphate, known in this instance as the Islamic State. The world observed as barbarism in real time took hold of the land, the likes of which had not been witnessed in centuries. The Christians of Iraq and Syria were driven to the brink of extinction. There's no shortage of tragic imagery in the media, yet here in Washington, the silence was deafening. Before IDC was formally established as an organization, it began as a movement led by a concerned group of like-minded friends. Finally, in September of 2014, their vision came to fruition at the inaugural IDC Summit. At the summit, IDC led a historic meeting of Eastern Christian patriarchs with President Barack Obama, formally introducing the U.S. government to the Christians of the Middle East for the first time. In 2016, IDC's advocacy resulted in Congress and the White House officially recognizing the ISIS crimes against humanity as a genocide against Christians. Following the official genocide recognition, IDC continued its work in Congress, and in 2018, Congress passed and President Trump signed into law the Iraq and Syria Genocide Relief and Accountability Act, which resulted in policy to provide much-needed relief to Christians and other religious minorities who survived the ISIS genocide. Following the territorial defeat of ISIS, IDC entered a new phase. The scope of our work expanded to include the persecution of Christians throughout the Middle East and North Africa. In 2019, Congress passed legislation to recognize the Armenian genocide, which claimed the lives of 3 million Christians, including Armenians, Greeks, and Syriacs. On April 24th, 2021, which also happened to be the Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, President Joe Biden became the first U.S. president in over a century to recognize the Armenian genocide. This recognition, both by Congress and the White House, was made possible by the advocacy of In Defense of Christians and many partner organizations, particularly the Armenian National Committee of America, to whom we're greatly thankful. These accomplishments would not have been possible but for the work of several IDC advocates throughout the years. We should be particularly thankful for the courage, commitment, and vision of that concerned group of like-minded friends who conceived the idea of IDC way back in 2012, 2013, and 2014. One of those friends is with us tonight, Andrew Doran. Andrew is an IDC co-founder who throughout his time with IDC has also served as vice president and president. He served on the Secretary of State's policy planning staff from 2018 to 2021 and is currently senior research fellow at the Fearless Project. Andrew's leadership continues to inspire scores of young professionals to serve both God and country. I'd like to invite Andrew to share some remarks.
Good evening, and thanks very much for being here, and congratulations on a successful 10th anniversary event here this week in Washington. And there's an old saying that if the young really knew how difficult something was going to be before they set out on the road, they would never do it. And there were moments 10 years ago, and before when that came to mind, there were a lot of struggles, and everyone, the many people you mentioned who were there as volunteers at the outset, and IDC began around dinner tables and in swing space and with a lot of blood, sweat, and toil. And it would take me a long time to go through the list of many volunteers who gave tirelessly of their time and their talent and their money to make that first event possible. And I do remember very distinctly. There's a saying that an old saying again that success has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. And we had to push ahead at the outset because many people were saying, you don't need to have this summit. Why have this summit? We should control this summit. And then we just said, no, we're going to push ahead and do this anyway. And then ISIS came onto the scene, and then everyone said, well, we certainly need to get behind this. And then there were controversies that arose very early on, and those remained. And then once again, it was difficult sometimes to find friends, and it was the same group of people who pushed through. And I'm so proud that everyone was able to push through those very difficult times at the outset, because what followed was 2 houses of Congress recognizing genocide, only the second time that the U.S. government recognized an ongoing genocide, 3 successive secretaries of state, and then this is all between 2014 and 2017. And then in 2017, the vice president announced emergency aid to the Christian communities and the Yazidi communities in Iraq. And in the time that followed, that aid found its way there. And from 2015 onwards, late 14, 15 onwards, it was Kirsten Evans, who's here with us as well, at the helm. This was a lot of hard work that many people said couldn't be done. And I always think about those humble origins and what the hard work has led to. And it has not, unfortunately, ceased to be important. What began with a quasi-state actor with ISIS governing most of Mesopotamia has continued. The need, because now we have not a quasi-state or non-state actors, we have a state in Azerbaijan that's seeking to eradicate, the complete eradication of the first Christian nation in the world, Armenia. And I'm so proud to see that IDC is there once again, taking the right side, that it continues that important work in Iraq, and in northern Iraq, especially with the Christian communities there, and standing up to Iran, which is a great destabilizing threat and malign influence, not just across the Near East, but around the world. And so it's very humbling just to have been a part of this work from the outset, and I'm immensely grateful to the Institute for Religion and Democracy here for not only for hosting us tonight, but for taking up that leadership role with IDC to continue this excellent work. And so thank you so much for having me, and keep up the great work. Thank you.
In June of 2023, IDC entered a new phase as it formed a partnership with the Institute on Religion and Democracy. The IRD is a Christian think tank committed to the traditional church teaching and ethics and advocating for constructive Christian witness in American society. This complementary partnership greatly extended IDC's reach for greater mission impact, while augmenting IRD's work in the area of international religious freedom. I'd like to invite the president of the Institute on Religion and Democracy, Mark Tooley, to share a few words tonight. Mark.
Thank you, Richard. It's wonderful to celebrate 10 years of IDC. I was there as an observer at the beginning, and very impressed by what was unfolding, but having no idea how IDC was going to later intersect with IRD. And so it was a providential and wonderful surprise when at Andrew Doran's suggestion last year that IDC, which was already renting space conveniently in our office suite, suggested, why doesn't IDC just become part of IRD? It was a brilliant idea that has worked out very nicely and called IRD back to our own origins and roots in that we were founded in 1981 to be an advocate for the persecuted church around the world and to be a voice of conscience for Christians in America and for churches in America that too often were silent about our persecuted brothers and sisters around the world. So it's been a great honor to partner with IDC and to work with Richard and with Bill Roberts, whom I sometimes call Quaker Bill. In fact, that should be his Twitter handle if he wanted to be more clever. But I know IDC has at least another 10 years or 20 years or hopefully even 30 years of advocacy on behalf of the persecuted church. So thank you for your magnificent work.
The persecution of Christians occurs in many diverse theaters and by many different actors. Exactly 1 year ago today, on September 19th, 2023, Azerbaijan carried out ethnic cleansing of the Armenian Christian homeland, Nagorno-Karabakh. In a 24-hour period, over 120,000 Christians were bombed and forcibly expelled from their homes in Azerbaijan. IDC joined with our friends at the Armenian National Committee of America and the Save Armenia Coalition to demand that the U.S. discontinue military assistance to Azerbaijan. And in November 2023, less than 2 months later, the Senate unanimously passed the Armenian Protection Act of 2023, which would discontinue U.S. military assistance to Azerbaijan. We're still hard at work to urge the House of Representatives to act in kind. On October 7th, 2023, the world witnessed the malign intentions of the Islamic Republic of Iran manifest in real time before our eyes in its gruesome and unprecedented attack in Israel. But make no mistake, for over 4 decades, Iran has financed, trained, equipped, and provided strategic advantage to proxy terrorist militias across the Middle East. These Iran-backed terror groups pose an existential threat to Christians in the Middle East, specifically the 2,000-year-old Christian communities in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. For several years, IDC has worked to push back against Iran's malign influence over the region. Since 2023, in response to Iran's mounting rhetoric and belligerent action, IDC has made Iran a top legislative priority. I'm proud to report that following several months of IDC's advocacy, in May of this year, Congress passed and the President signed into law the Fight Crime Act and the SHIP Act, which sanction countries, entities, and individuals who buy Iranian missiles or profit from Iranian petroleum. This important policy directly targets Iran's proxy financing and lifeblood of Iran-backed terror. But our work is not over. Since its inception, the work of IDC has been made possible by the conviction, expertise, and the sound counsel of IDC's advisory board. Next, I'd like to invite up to the podium the former chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom and current president of the International Religious Freedom Secretariat and longtime friend and board member of IDC, Nadine Manza.
Well, good evening. It's such an honor and privilege to join all of you and, of course, be a part of this 10-year celebration of In Defense of Christians. And, the first award I ever received for doing any of this work was from IDC in 2021. And, especially with the work I've been doing in Iraq and Syria over the years, I've always felt like I was a fish swimming upstream, kind of, rocking the boat a little bit, not always doing the most popular work. I honestly never thought I would ever win an award for it. And so that was a surprise, and I appreciated just the acknowledgement. And I was so thankful to have IDC as a partner and to have found them, and really thankful to them and all of you here, Ambassador Rashad Hussain, the work you've done as well, all of you for your love and care and commitment to Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East. And I loved being a part of the Capitol Hill Day yesterday. If you didn't have a chance to be a part of it, it was packed in here as we began. I think we were part of a team that went and talked about Iraq and specifically about House Resolution 554 that could help guide U.S. policy more effectively to support religious minorities in Iraq. And of course, another important piece authored by In Defense of Christians, quietly, but nevertheless written, working with congressional offices. And, I appreciate how IDC brings advocates together in order to be more impactful, because that at our secretariat, our round table, the work we do convening people, it's really the power is us working together. And so that's one of the things I really respect and appreciate about the IDC team, and about the important advocacy they do. I tell this story a lot, but as a Trump appointee at USCIRF, I remember sometimes we would have some supporters of the administration surprised and a little angry that we had released this blistering attack against the administration for a policy on a country or an issue. And I would laugh like they wanted us to send that, like they needed us to send that. It's like how this system works. It takes pressure to force change, and we are more effective when we're working together to build that momentum for change. For instance, when we talk about Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and even those in the administration that want to change policy on those countries, they need pressure from stakeholders, from Congress, to be able to make that change, to take it to the higher ups, and even, to be honest, people at the very top need that kind of pressure to go to these countries and say, hey, we're getting all this pressure. USCIRF did this, Congress did this, this group's, all of this is happening and you need to change this. And so, I love the tone of IDC's advocacy because I feel like it's not personal, it's not partisan. We want this issue to change, and able to have those conversations with the administration and with Congress in a way that we're all working together instead of pitting us against each other. And of course, right now I'm especially concerned about what's happening with the potential U.S. troops being pulled in Iraq. Obviously, we're not going to know, what that's going to look like for a while, but the impact that could have on the religious minorities in Iraq, perhaps in Syria if troops are pulled from there. And in particularly how Iran is, in the last couple of months, taken over the Nineveh Plains and removed 15 of the mayors, including the last Christian mayors left. And so if that stands, you almost can't even process what that one means for the Christians that remain. So I want to say thanks again in Defense of Christians for just doing the hard work, the unglamorous work, just the day-to-day work. All of you for supporting them. And of course, Institute on Religion and Democracy for being such a great partner. And of course, the State Department for being so transparent, always coming and taking all of the suggestions we give and the pressure, and taking it back and sharing it in the best possible way, because we're really so glad to have that seat at the table to be able to communicate, with government and be able to work together, because that's really the only way that we're going to find those policies that are in the best interest of the United States, but also support these religious minorities. So thanks again for having me. I'm really glad to be here tonight.
Thank you, Nadine. We're also thankful for our many partners in government who share the same heart and conviction for our first freedom, the freedom of religion, not just as Americans, but universally as humans. Without our friends in Congress and the executive branch, our work would not be possible. The Office of International Religious Freedom at the U.S. State Department was established by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998 to promote universal respect for the freedom of religion as a core objective, not just a means, but indeed an objective of U.S. foreign policy. We're honored to have with us tonight U.S. Ambassador for International Religious Freedom, Ambassador Rashad Hussain.
Well, thank you so much, Rich. I very much relish the opportunities to be with you all. The community that I've gotten to know now so well, not just in this position as Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, but over the years, doing work, particularly in the Middle East and Muslim-majority countries, on the protection of Christians and other religious minorities, the Marrakesh Declaration, work at the UN on countering blasphemy and apostasy laws. As I've gotten to know you all and I've had the opportunity to work with you, I greatly appreciate the sincerity that you bring to the work that you do every day, the dedication to the work that you do every day, the ability that you seem to have more than any other advocacy community to transcend the deep partisan divides that we're experiencing and to come together. I continue to work closely with my friend Ambassador Brownback, my predecessor, his predecessor, Ambassador Saperstein. And look, you've got a Jewish person, a Christian, and a Muslim now serving in this role, 3 consecutive ambassadors. It really speaks to who we are as a country. And these are important aspects of what we're doing to remember, because there is no question that these are very, very difficult times that we're going through. And we're seeing a rise in authoritarianism, backsliding in democracy. And with that, we've seen increased repression of religious freedom. And that is a challenge, but it's so encouraging to see the response that we continue to see. The organizations that are growing around the world, the civil society, to respond to the challenges that we're facing, to protect religious freedom around the world. The proliferation of envoys and representatives at the national level to multilateral level to defend the sacred right of religious freedom. So we are facing challenges that are unprecedented, but we're also meeting those challenges with an unprecedented response. And we didn't get to the position that we're in overnight. It's taken a long time to get to where we are, and we're not going to solve these challenges overnight. But what we are going to do every single day is fight as much as we can and as hard as we can to defend the right of every single person. If that means working on individual cases, that's something that we do on a daily basis as an office. If it means protecting one life or saving one life, that's meaningful. But obviously, it's much more than that. It is dealing with the policies that lead to persecution around the world, to addressing blasphemy laws, apostasy laws, laws that lead to discrimination against religious communities. So it is an honor to do this work. It's an honor to be with IDC. And over the past 10 years, IDC has been a vocal champion for the protection and promotion of religious freedom and the plight of persecuted Christians. Many of the challenges to religious freedom and those that are facing Christians today are systemic. As I said, they cannot be solved by quick fixes. They cannot be solved with breezy slogans, but we can never give up. We cannot give up. These challenges demand sustained commitment from all of us who are unwilling to accept hatred, intolerance, and persecution as the status quo. As we reach the 10th anniversary of ISIS's genocide, we can also reflect on the ongoing crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing against Christians, Yazidis, Shia Muslims, and others in Iraq and Syria. The lingering effects of these events are still shaping our efforts to help rebuild impacted communities while also seeking accountability and justice. On the heels of these atrocities in the Middle East, IDC stepped in and elevated the voices of Christians from across the Middle East to ensure that American policymakers not only heard their concerns, but that we took action. Over the past 10 years, IDC's work was instrumental in helping the U.S. reach the determination that ISIS's actions constituted a genocide, which prompted a flow of U.S. resources to help the survivors of that brutality and those that still live under that threat. I want to emphasize that the daily experiences of Christians in the Middle East are connected to events taking place across the globe and are intertwined with conditions that Christians face worldwide. Nonetheless, we are committed to protecting the religious freedom of all Christians, including protecting their ability to affiliate with fellow believers and order their lives according to their conscience, free of coercion or intimidation. I have traveled to the Middle East several times over to raise these concerns and these issues myself, as have many colleagues at the State Department and throughout our government. And we have worked with like-minded partners in the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance, with the International Religious Freedom Roundtable and others to advocate for the end of blasphemy laws and other laws that are used to target religious minorities. And we've championed efforts to speak out about global persecution of Christians and called for governments to protect members of these communities. Earlier this year, Secretary Blinken recognized a group of 9 Orthodox clergy from Lithuania and Belarus with the Secretary of State's International Religious Freedom Award. Their Moscow-aligned churches defrocked them when they defiantly condemned Russia's war against Ukraine. 2 of them were forced to leave Belarus. Together in Lithuania, the group of 9 started a new religious community that is under the authority of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Now, this religious community welcomes Orthodox believers seeking to worship free from Moscow's influence, including Lithuanians, Ukrainian war refugees, and exiles fleeing oppression in Belarus and Russia. In the Middle East, Christians have made countless vital contributions to the region's rich tapestry of cultures and traditions. However, many Christians are experiencing a time of great challenge and deepening concern. For example, since 2011, Christians in Syria have been victims of the ongoing Assad regime's war, ISIS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and other armed groups that specifically have targeted Christians. These acts have resulted in the destruction of churches, seizure of church property, forced conversions, and mass displacement. Many Christians that remain in country are facing discrimination, marginalization, and ongoing violence. Suffering and violence can happen to anyone, Christian and non-Christian alike. Since 2018, the United States has provided more than $500 million in assistance to members of religious and ethnic minority communities that were targeted for genocide in Iraq and in Syria. Following the Hamas terrorist attacks against Israel on October 7, 2023, we have seen a marked increase in levels of fear, anger, frustration, and even despair. The suffering is felt by Christians as well as Jews and Muslims. In the course of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, ancient churches in Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon were destroyed. The Christian community in Gaza is reduced from approximately 1,100 to 650 people. The remaining Christians in Gaza are taking shelter in churches, which are not excluded from attacks. There are predictions of the complete eradication of the entire Christian community in Gaza. These examples underscore the importance of protecting the sanctities of all places of worship, of Christians, Jews, Muslims, and members of all religious communities. Therefore, we continue our steadfast commitment to create a world where everyone can live free from the threat of violence or persecution for their religious identity or belief. And securing the rights of Christians is an extension of our wider mission to promote human rights, including religious freedom for all everywhere. I am confident that over the next decade, conditions will improve because of your continued advocacy on these issues. Thank you for all that you do to help make this vision a reality, and thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ambassador. Although ISIS is no longer an immediate threat, our work is not over. The message of IDC is more critical than ever. Throughout the 20th century, Christians in the Middle East have faced seemingly endless sequence of atrocities and genocides, beginning with the Ottoman Empire and continuing with a series of Arab socialist dictators and Islamic jihadi movements that have popped up along the way. At the turn of the 20th century, Christians comprised upwards of 20% of the Middle East's total population, but today they've plunged below 2% and plummeting still. The grim fact is Christianity is on the brink of extinction in the very cradle of the faith. Unless we take decisive action, total eradication could materialize in our lifetimes. And make no mistake, a Middle East without Christians is a prospect the world cannot afford. For millennia, Christians have contributed to the diverse human tapestry of faiths, languages, and ideas in the Middle East, and have served as a bridge to bridge cultural divides between East and West. The preservation of Christians in the Middle East is an essential element to maintaining stability, peace, and progress in the greater region. A Middle East without Christians would create a narrowing of ideas, identities, and beliefs, rendering a larger segment of the otherwise moderate society susceptible to radical ideology. Furthermore, if Christianity disappears in the Middle East, the world stands to lose something very special, a 2,000-year-old Christian heritage. Middle Eastern Christianity is indeed a common heritage shared by worldwide Christendom, even in the West. Middle Eastern Christianity provides a unique and authentic access into the mind, culture, and worldview that gave birth to Christianity 2,000 years ago. If the millennia-old Middle Eastern Christian heritage were to disappear, an irreplaceable void would be left in its wake. This is more than a political matter. This is indeed a civilizational question. For 2 millennia, Mideast Christians have been stuck in the middle, with no seat at the table and no one to speak on their behalf. But since 2014, IDC has endeavored to take on this Herculean task. But our work is only possible through the generosity of our faithful supporters, and we've been blessed to have you all in our corner throughout the years. If anyone tonight wishes to contribute to IDC's ongoing efforts, please see me. We also have donation cards here tonight, or you can go online to indefenseofchristians.org to make a contribution. Your gift is an investment toward the preservation of Christian communities in the Middle East and their ancient Christian heritage. Please know how grateful we are. So So once again, I thank you for joining us this evening in solidarity. This concludes this portion of the program, but please, you're welcome to help yourself to food and drink and enjoy each other's company. And I look forward to seeing each one of you tonight. Thank you.